What's going on today, guys? So this video is going to cover the relays required for the Microsquirt to run this engine. There's only 3 major relays that we're going to do. We got the relay that's going to power the fuse panel. We have the relay that's going to do the VTEC solenoid, and the relay that's going to do the fuel pump. I'm not going to go over the other relays, say like the fan relay and stuff like that, because it's going to be vehicle dependent. And like on the EK chassis, that's already going to be wired in. So all we're going to have to do is plug into the pin on the thermostat housing, and that's actually just going to work. So with that, I do want to do a little update. The Del Sol motor is doing great. I've got about 150 miles on her, and everything's going good. And with that, I would like to point out that on the video stats, a lot of people have seen the guide part 1, which is a schematic video basically of how this thing's wired up. And then the part 2 goes over the crank gear, and then part 3 goes over the wiring a little more hands-on. I would like to point out that part 2 has a noticeably lower view count. And I'm only pointing this out because if people get to the wiring of it and they get the engine in it and get it all wired, they're actually going to have to pull the motor back out to modify that crank gear. So I just want to point that out. If you are starting the wiring or you are already in the wiring and didn't see that, you definitely want to go back, because this thing will not work without that modification. So go back and watch that. And with that, I also want to get on to something else. I have a 3D printer. Now, I've had this for a few years, and I've basically just played around with it, made various things, and just kind of messed around with it. I've never done anything too crazy serious with it. But I backed a Kickstarter that company produced a scanner, and this scanner is being used by a bunch of people that are doing testing on it, and they are using it for automotive stuff, and that just flooded my mind with all kinds of ideas. And I have various things on this car and the hatch that I could use that on, so I went ahead and backed it. If that's something that you guys want to see, go ahead and throw it in the comments, or if there's something specific you want to see if it'll work on, throw it in the comments, and I will try to make a video on it. I've actually made a little flow bench, and I actually used the printer underneath of it to connect the piping. And then I actually have the gauge to show me if the modifications I'm doing to the heads are increasing flow or hurting me. So the printer is nice to have on certain projects, but if there's something specific you want to see, throw it in the comments. I'll see if I can do it. And let's go ahead and get started on this relay video. All right, guys, let's go over the relay wiring. Now, this was a commenter wanted to go over this, so I told him I would make a quick video, and let's get into it. So you're going to need 3 relays. Now, one of them is going to be the main relay. This is actually going to power the fuse panel that we're going to run all the Microsquirt stuff off of. Now, if you're doing a different chassis or a dune buggy or something like that, you're going to want to size this relay to run everything that's going to be on that fuse panel. So this will vary with size depending on your application. For the EK, the stuff that I'm going to run off this fuse panel, it's going to add up to maybe 70 amps at the most. I run a bigger fuel pump, so my relay is going to be a little bigger. Now, you're going to notice in my car, I actually have a 40 amp relay. I actually don't suggest that. It's kind of underpowered. It is working, but I like to stay on the safe side. So I actually bought this relay. I just haven't had the chance to put it in yet. I will probably do that this weekend. So with that out of the way, this relay is going to power the fuse panel. Now, with this car, I'm going to tap into an existing fuse on another fuse panel that is factory in the car. I'm going to use a fuse tap, so it's actually going to pull a fuse out. It's going to go in place of that fuse, and then it'll have two fuses, one for the original circuit, and then one that it's actually going to have an external wire tap coming off of it. That tap wire is going to come to this, and then the other side is going to ground out. This is going to come off the battery, and then this is actually going to go to the new fuse panel that we're going to run. So this is a 4-pin relay. This is all you need on these, is a 4-pin relay. Now you'll notice on these, this is a 5-pin relay. Now, we actually do not need a 5-pin relay. It's fine. If that's all you can get, you can still use it. On the 5-pin relays, we're going to get rid of this middle wire. Now, pay attention, and on the relays, the pins will be numbered. And then you'll have the schematic. The schematic will tell you what wire is what. So, on this one, the 87A wire is the middle pin, and this is a yellow. Sometimes it's not yellow, so double check this stuff. And then also, the white-black are the coils. So this is actually what makes the relay flip. I like to test these. I like to put, like this one's white, so I would assume that this is a key power or a hot wire, and the black is the ground. That's not always the case. So double check this stuff. There's too many people out there making pigtails, and they're not following a standard. So, with that, we only need 4 of these wires. This yellow wire in the center, we're either going to use a butt connector, or we're just going to depin it and get rid of it. So, what we're going to end up doing, we're going to act like this is the fuel pump relay. And the fuel pump is going to need a 30 amp hot on mine. So I run a 30 amp fuse that's powered off of this relay. I run that to the panel, and then I run this to the panel, and this has a 30 amp fuse. Now, in its natural state, with no power going to the coils, this yellow wire is going to be hot. That's what the 5-pin relay is for. This is hot, and then whenever these become activated, the hot changes from the yellow to the blue. Now, this gets the 30 amp hot, the blue goes to the fuel pump, which is 87, and then the yellow we get rid of. The white and black, after we've tested it and determined that which one is hot and which one is ground, some of them don't matter. Some of them can be wired either way. Some of them do. So just double check. The wire, the white wire here, is the hot. So I'm going to run this to the fuse panel. Now, both of these relays can share the same hot, because what we're actually controlling this relay with is the ground wire. Now, this is the fuel pump. So what we're going to do is we're going to wire this to the fuel pump wire on the Microsquirt. So the Microsquirt is actually going to ground this relay. It's going to kick the relay on, and then the power is going to go from the red to the blue, powering our fuel pump. So that covers the fuel pump. Let's go to the VTEC solenoid. This is the same standards. The white goes to the fuse panel. The red goes to the fuse panel. Now, being that it's a VTEC solenoid, and this is a coil, these two do not take a lot of power to activate. So we can actually tie the white and the red together. And we can run this on, say, a 5 amp fuse. A 5 amp fuse should be able to run these two and the VTEC solenoid all at the same time, no problem. Now, the same thing as the fuel pump, this yellow wire is not going to be used. So we either, put a butt connector on there or just depin it and get rid of it. And then the Microsquirt ground, or this ground, the black wire, is going to go to the Microsquirt, and the blue is going to go to the VTEC solenoid. Now, if you watched the last video, you'll know that I told you to run the ALED straight to the VTEC solenoid. That's because we're actually going to cut that wire. The black is going to go to the Microsquirt side of that cut wire, and the blue is going to go to the engine side. And what that's going to do is, as soon as the Microsquirt wants to turn VTEC on, it's going to ground this wire, because that's what it does. It grounds stuff. It's going to ground this wire, and then the red is going to go from yellow to blue, and it's going to send a positive voltage to the VTEC solenoid. Now, you'll notice I want to get rid of these yellows because whenever the microsquirt's not grounding anything, these yellows are hot. So you don't want these flopping around, arcing out on everything. Just either depin them or put a butt connector on them and close them up in the loom. So let's get to the car. All right, so the first thing I want to cover is this fuse tap. Now, the fuse tap, I tied into the factory fuse panel down here, and I pulled out a fuse, and I know that one was hot. I used a test light. Key on is hot. Whenever the key's off, it powers down. It runs the same 20 amp fuse that it was running. And then I got a 3 amp fuse that powers the main relay. So the Del Sol comes with this nice little panel in the back, and this is where I decided to put my fuse panel. Now, like I stated before, this is a 6 fuse panel, so it only carries 6, and I suggest getting an 8. This is a hair too small. As you can see here, I ended up going back, splitting the injector positives, and kind of had to rig this up. I don't like this, so I suggest everybody get an 8 fuse panel or 8 slot, and then we'll go from there. As you can see here, this is the relay that fuse tap powers, this upper one, and that powers the positive post on the fuse panel. Now this is only 40 amp. I want to swap that out with that 120 amp, so I suggest people go ahead and make sure you oversize your relays. What I'll end up doing is throwing this 40 down here to this 30, which powers the fuel pump, and then that'll be oversized, and we'll be able to go from there. This one actually runs the VTEC solenoid. So, all right, guys, that should be all of this video, and don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. And if you have anything else you want me to cover, go ahead, throw it in the comments. I'll try to make a quick video about it. And we'll see you guys later.